Of course, the real deal is that Boris Johnson has been incredibly good for business in the same way that Donald Trump was incredibly good for business. I'm talking largely about journalism, and particularly journalism that leans towards commentary and analysis rather than mere reportage. Very, very good for business. Appalling for the country. Great for business, bad for Britain. Have you seen what the pound is doing this morning? Have you seen that? You've seen the IMF warnings about our energy crisis being worse than anywhere else in Europe. You've seen the fact that you can't even take the kids to Disneyland Paris anymore on a direct train because of the new checks that are coming in later this year. All of this, arguably a legacy of Boris Johnson's premiership. But I am interested today, genuinely, in what you're going to remember him for. What you're going to remember his premiership for. Allies and client journalists already making noises about possible comebacks. And pay attention to this. You would think, wouldn't you, that being hounded out of office by your closest colleagues after being found to have broken the law in the actual seat of government, in the actual heart of our democracy, you'd think that would be the end of anybody's career. But Boris Johnson has done countless things in the course of his life that would have been the end of anybody else's career. From his sexual incontinence, his appalling treatment of wives and mistresses, right through, and children, of course, one of whom he went to court to seek to sort of deny the existence of. Absolutely catastrophic moral compass, non-existent moral compass, any other career. Well, because of shame, you see. So shame with any other politician would have played a part and led them to defenestrate themselves. But to be completely without shame, and this is where I was a bit slow on the uptake, a bit slow on the obvious comparison with Donald Trump. I didn't want to believe it because, do you know what? I didn't want to believe it because of patriotism. I didn't want to believe that we here could have ended up putting into power someone as depraved, albeit in a slightly different way, as Donald Trump. But what the two men have in common is a complete absence of shame, an inability to feel shame, an inability to feel ashamed, an inability to be embarrassed, an absolutely Teflon approach to the standards and the requirements of civilization by which the rest of us abide. And already, of course, you're hearing echoes of that infamous letter from his headmaster at Eton describing precisely that personality type. He honestly seems to think that he should be exempt from the standards that the rest of us have to observe. So that, I put it like that, and it's going to sound a bit silly to suggest that didn't necessarily have to lead to disaster. But that didn't necessarily have to lead to disaster. In some ways, having a politician devoid of normal conscience, devoid of shame, lacking any capacity for embarrassment or self-reflection, you could imagine circumstances in which it could almost be a positive if you needed to make swift decisions. But of course, he couldn't do that either. He never makes any decision until the last possible moment, when the decision is essentially made for him. You saw it with lockdowns. So many people died before he called the lockdowns. He couldn't even be bothered to go to the Cobra meetings, the first 5 Cobra meetings at the beginning of the outbreak. And when it becomes inarguable that he must do something, he does it and then claims that he got all the big calls right. He hasn't made a single call in the whole history of his prime ministerial career. Not a single call. Everything he's ever done has been as a consequence of opportunism or necessity. I don't think he's made a single decision since he became prime. I don't think he's made a single decision since puberty that could be put down to genuine integrity or even ideology. What's best for me? What's best for me? And the third criteria upon which Boris Johnson makes decisions, what's best for me? So even when he's done things he didn't really want to do, like introduce policies that would stop the bodies from piling high, he's done so because to not do it would have been worse for him than to do it. So the only break upon his selfishness is his self-interest. That's astonishing when you think about it. But again, quick glance across the Atlantic and there is Donald Trump doing exactly the same thing. The only break upon the selfishness is self-interest. When doing the thing I don't want to do will actually be more in my self-interest than doing the thing I do want to do. I think you should write that one down, Keith, actually. The only break upon his selfishness is self-interest. And you see it with Trump, who, of course, is still lying through his teeth about the election result and, of course, about the top-secret documents that he stole from the American people, that he stole from the White House and has now been busted for on a scale that at any other point in history with any other politician, any other American president, we would all be sitting here now going, oh my days! We'd be spluttering with incomprehension and incredulity, not just going, oh look, something else absolutely awful and unprecedented being done by somebody who is absolutely awful and unprecedented. It's incredible, and we have our equivalent here in Britain. We have people who are still persuaded that Johnson has been anything other than a cataclysmic catastrophe for this country, in the same way that there are millions of people in America persuaded that Donald Trump actually won the last election and would once again make a brilliant president. I resisted the parallels for ages. But you can't anymore. In fact, as one text has already pointed out, that double article, the 2 columns he wrote about Brexit, are the absolute essence of that description of him being a man who's the only brake upon his selfishness is self-interest. You know, what's best for me? It's incredible.